we go. Welcome to it, UAP Studies Podcast. A very special guest today, Thomas Winterton from Skinwalker Ranch. He's his second time returning to the show. So joining me as usual is Jason Gilmet, my studious co-host. How are you, buddy?
Oh, I'm very good. I like your choice of words there.
Yeah,
It's
for
very
sure.
polite. Yeah.
It's a complimentary day today, so everyone's going to get pats on the back. So for those of you that don't know about Skinwalker Ranch, we're going to cover what it is, briefly some of the phenomenon that's happened there, the rise in popularity, which has obviously led to the show. And Thomas can kind of explain sort of what brought him to the ranch and the first couple seasons, and now what we can expect from season 3. So welcome to the show, Thomas. Welcome back.
Hey, great. Thanks. It's great to be back.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit about yourself, sort of before the ranch, and what led to you, going there in the first place, and then leading up to your position that you hold now.
Yeah. So before the ranch, I was a general contractor in the state of Utah. Specialized in building high-end custom homes, like commercial, that kind of stuff. Then built a couple small boutique hotels, 2 here in the basin and 1 up North Dakota, and that's how I came to be on the ranch. Was my wife and I were actually running one of those hotels here in Roosevelt when Brandon purchased the ranch in 2016. And that first week that he had it, he sent his close confidant friend Jim Morse out to help start figuring out, exactly what they got. Jim actually checked into my hotel. We got visiting. He found out I was a licensed general contractor. Asked me if I would like to come out and do a property inspection for him. Being the famous Skinwalker Ranch that was mysterious, nobody comes on, nobody goes off. It's been the source of legends around here in the basin for decades now. And so I got that invitation to come out and do a property inspection for him, and gladly accepted, and went out and found that the ranch was in a pretty sad state of disrepair. There were a lot of things that needed attention. There were some that were very, very urgent, that needed immediate attention. The wastewater system, the sewer was not working properly, and we had some legal issues with the county and the easement that went through the middle of the ranch. So I helped Brandon get those taken care of and fixed. And Brandon asked me if I would stay on and run the ranch, seeing as how I live here in Roosevelt, which is the closest city to the ranch. And so been on helping ever since.
Yeah, and for those of us who don't, or for those who haven't heard about sort of the ranch itself, real quick. So it's 480 acres. It's in the Uinta Basin in Utah, purchased by a rancher family in 1994, I believe it was. They started having weird paranormal phenomena happen and things to kind of freak them out. And 2 years later, it was subsequently sold to Robert Bigelow, the creator of NIDS and obviously Bigelow Aerospace. So he's a big enough name in itself. And he was the first one to actually spend some money and try to do some research and figure out like what's actually going on with this place and all the weird phenomenon that's happening. And as you said, subsequently it's been purchased by Brendan Fugal in 2016. So the thing I find amazing about this ranch, and again, it predates this in legend too. The local native tribes believe that the land is cursed, and the term skinwalker for them covers a large array of phenomenon, whether it's lights or sightings or creatures or whatever. It was all just chalked up to skinwalker. But some of the things that even our previous guest, George Knapp, mentioned in his book, Skinwalkers at the Pentagon, it's UFOs, cryptids. There's been temperature drops reported, blue orbs, bipedal wolf hybrid or skinwalker type animals, poltergeist phenomenon, cattle mutilations, even holes in the sky and portals, which, the show that you're on highlighted as well. So maybe take us through season 1 of that show with Brendan Fugal and yourself and Travis Taylor and all the rest of those guys.
Yeah, it's interesting. It seemed like such a long time ago. We all, at least all of our team, came on as really healthy skeptics. We'd heard a lot of these stories, many of the things you just mentioned, and came on and really was just observing to see, is there really anything strange going on here? It didn't take very long before we all started having our own experiences there. I personally started having experiences there. Brandon and a group had their sightings there. And so very quickly, the question turned from, is there something happening to the ranch or at the ranch, to, wow, there is something happening here. What do we do? A lot of discussions about whether to share with the public the things that we were witnessing, whether we kept it private. To this day, we still have not received any data from the Bigelow era. And so we were the pros and cons, and the right time at the right place, I guess. We got TJ Allard that comes and goes through with us and finally convinces Brandon to do a show. And so we started to season 1, and we bring, as part of the show, the agreement really is, look, we're going to do this, but we're not casting. Like, you're going to come and follow our investigation. That means we're using our team members. We're using, we're not casting this. And it's a pretty big risk for the network. You have a bunch of individuals that are unknown. I mean, it's one thing to be out there doing science, but can you carry a television show?
Right.
Ratings are the name of the game. And it's amazing how many people get out there and you turn the cameras on and they freeze, or they're not acting like normal. And so I can imagine from the network side, there's a fairly substantial risk there. You don't know how these individuals are going to translate on camera. And they really wanted to have an additional scientist there that they knew would translate, right? And so you have Travis Taylor, who's done Rocket City Rednecks, the Tesla Files, and Travis, I mean, he flat out just told us straight up, he thought we were all batshit crazy. And he didn't think there was anything happening on that ranch that couldn't be explained in under 2 weeks. So we get Travis out there. You see in season 1, we get Travis out there, and immediately things start to happen. We start seeing RF and signals that we can't figure out, where they're coming from. We end up triangulating. I think big takeaway in season 1 is that yes, there are some things going on here that are strange, and we started to identify some areas. I say we started to identify. We caught some things during the show that indicated there may be something happening above the triangle. We had triangulated some signals that seemed to be coming from about a mile high, which really took us kind of into season 2. Season 1, I don't want to forget too. I had a scare where I started to have a little bit of a reoccurrence on my head injury. Travis, see, I get the seasons mixed up now. I think it was season 1 when Travis
Got
Dr.
those radiation burns, right?
Got the radiation burns. Yeah. We had the equipment going off. And see, that was a big concern when we started the show. The network everything is about liability. I mean, everybody's trying to cover their butts. And so here we are touting how dangerous this ranch is. And of course, I've had this head injury. It almost cost me my life. So the network came on very cautious. And before we even started filming, we brought Qualtech out of Idaho down. They do a lot of testing for the military, for the government. They're experts in radiation and that kind of stuff. So they came down, did a sweep of the ranch, and we got a clean bill of health, right? Not a trace. So here comes Travis, and he's getting radiation burns, and our equipment's just going crazy. We had multiple meters indicating that there had been a high dose of radiation. Where did it come from? I mean, we swept the ranch. So immediately, we shut everything down. We bring Qualtech back down. They go and they do a complete thorough search and analysis of the areas that we were in. Nothing. Well, anybody that knows about that just knows that doesn't just come and go.
Yeah.
And so that really, those couple of instances, I'll never forget. After Qualtech comes down and sweeps, they just did their second sweep. But after Travis gets radiated, we bring him down. They do the second sweep. We're down there filming around the Homestead 2 area. We can't find anything. The cameras are going down for the day. Travis walks out of Homestead 2 and he's all, y'all, I think I'm going batshit crazy. And really that was the highlight of season 1 for all of us, was making a believer out of Travis. I mean, him having his own experiences. And we come into season 2 and we start drilling down a little bit more. We did the big holes there in the triangle. Again, just had a lot of unexplainable things happen. And
you poured some water down an opening as well, did you not? And put some dye in it just to see where it would potentially be draining out, if anywhere. And the water just disappeared and never went anywhere, right? It was never found after the fact.
Yeah. So, look, we inherited a narrative. That's really what we got from the Bigelow era. We didn't get data. We didn't get any details, really. We inherited a narrative. And part of this narrative that we received is that there's large caverns. There's an underground base, right? There's tunnels inside the mesa. There's a report that the mesa opened up and a craft flew into the mesa. So we're looking all over the property trying to find these caverns, these tunnels, any type of evidence that would indicate that, yes, there's some type of cavernous void, whether it's under the ranch or in the mesa. And in just my regular responsibilities, one of the things I do is irrigate the ranch. I mean, we have to water it to keep it green. And there's there by Homestead 2, between season 1 and season 2, I'm irrigating and there's this pit off to the side of Homestead 2, and it's filled with trees and brush and all kinds of stuff that makes it impossible to see just how deep this pit is. Well, my thought is that if I diverted my irrigation canal ran right to the side of it, and I thought, well, and I had a pretty good stream of water. I thought, well, maybe if I just divert that in, how fast it fills up will tell me how deep it is. So I diverted the water, and it took a long time to fill that up. I forget now. I've got it written down somewhere, but I want to say it took like 3 hours to fill that thing up. This is a pretty good stream of water.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, okay, so I cut the water off to it, and within 15 minutes, the water's out of sight, which told me maybe it's not deep. Maybe the water is traveling somewhere. I mean, for the water to disappear that quick. And the other thing, important detail to note in this is right there in that area. If you look all the way around the homestead there, it's clay. Clay just does not absorb water, right? We line our ponds and stuff with clay around here to keep the water from leaching down through. So clay is not a good soil to be absorbing water. So it had to be going somewhere. And so as you saw on TV, we redid that exercise where we diverted the water in there and we poured the dye in so that we could see where it was going. And we watched. Matter of fact, see that dye glows with, you can hit it with a black light at night and it'll glow. And so we poured it in there. I think we put either 30 or 40,000 gallons of water in there. And
that's a lot of water.
And the funny thing, this a little bit of behind the scenes, filming is sometimes filming with science is frustrating.
I was going to ask you that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many moving parts of filming. And so we started that day that we started to fill that. The deal is that the production, everybody's going to be there. And I don't quite remember what happened. We started filling this pit. And then all of a sudden we got the signal like, hey, hang on, there's a delay. So we shut the water off. So all that water disappeared. And it was probably, I mean, we'd filled it a pretty good amount. And then we had to stop it, right? To wait for production. So now we get the film guys over there and we start over again. So what you see on TV, we'd already dumped a ton of water in there before we even got to the filming part, right? And so we put 30 or 40,000 gallons down this hole. We watched it for a couple of weeks because we thought maybe maybe it would surface someplace, even at night. After we were done filming, then a couple of us guys get on the UTVs, ride down through there's a creek that runs through the middle of the ranch. We take the black lights down there. We were scanning along the edges, looking for traces. We have no idea where it went.
Well,
Now, what is it about the disturbing the ground? Because I know in season one, when you were sort of introducing the ranch and the phenomenon to everybody, and I think it was Dragon who was super against like digging. We're not doing any digging. The belief being that that's what kind of spooks on this phenomenon and makes things go nuts is when you start messing with the ground. So, what was it about that? Maybe you can elaborate on that. The fear behind digging.
There was a lot of different fears, and um, so we, again, going back to this narrative that we inherited, is one of the first things that was told to me when I started working on the ranch. Bigelow's security team, they either used their own vehicle to drive across the little road that crosses the ranch, or they were on foot. And that little road that crosses the ranch just goes east to west, but it doesn't, it kind of takes you through the middle of the property. So if we wanted to traverse the property, it was either by foot or, we got UTVs, but the brush was so thick. And so one of the first things that I decided when Brandon turned the place over to me in speaking with Eric and Dragon was, we need a way to be able to get these UTVs around the perimeter of the property. It's hard to secure 512 acres on foot. And so I went to town starting to blaze the roads, and my intention was to build a road around the entire perimeter so we could get the UTVs around quickly. And I was just on the very beginning stages of that when I got pulled aside and told, hey, just so you know, the Bigelow, the scientists, they actually didn't say scientists. They just said the people from the Bigelow era said that bad things happen when you dig, that there shouldn't be any digging. And of course, my first reaction is that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Like, this is
naturally, yeah.
Ranch. That's what we do. We dig ditches. I'm looking around, I'm seeing the ditches. Obviously, the ranch house has a basement. There's all kinds of signs of digging on the place, right? And so I just shrugged it off, thought that's absurd. And I went about my business building these roads. And I had so many things happen to both myself and the equipment in the process of building those roads. I'll tell you right now, there's a specific section of ranch that I have not finished yet. My skid steer, which was it was basically brand new when I took it out to the ranch, had 400 hours on it when I took it out there. So anybody that knows equipment knows it was a case 440 skid steer, and 400 hours on it. So it's basically brand new. And just from the things that happened to it there on the ranch, within what is it, 2 years, it shot a rod straight out the side of the motor. And like, I maintain my equipment, and there are just so many things. I'll give you an example. One day I did a pretty deep cut going down into the creek on the south side of the ranch. And the next morning when I come to get in my skid steer to start working, the batteries were dead. Well, we have battery loss all the time out there. So I got my truck. I had a diesel pickup at the time, heavy duty batteries. And I had the great big industrial heavy duty jumper cables. Put it on there. I've had dead battery on that skid steer before. I forgot to turn the key off and it would run dead. Well, the key wasn't turned off, so whatever ran dead didn't come from me leaving the key turned on. Put the jumper cables on, go to start the truck or go to start it, and it won't even click. Like, it's almost as if I'm not making connections. So I sit there and fiddle around for 30 minutes trying to get these jumper cables. Finally, I go over to the command center and grab got a big commercial battery jumper there, like you get from Napa.
The booster
Crank
pack.
that over to engine start, and this is the kind you plug into the wall. Okay. And I put it on the engine start. It was like 225 amps or whatever to start it. So I left the jumper cables on from my truck, and I put the charger cables on it, and it's still nothing. I couldn't get it to register. So what I ended up doing is I took the batteries out, took them in, got them replaced, brought them out, and it fired right up. So whatever drained those batteries drained them to a point that they couldn't be They couldn't be.
They flatline, basically. You can't charge them up again.
Yep, they were ruined.
How often does your cell phone go out as well? Like, how often do you get those occurrences?
That happens a lot, and it happens. Season 1 and 2. I'll tell you right now. I'm trying to think if there was ever an exception to this. A lot of these companies we bring on these experts. I mean, this is really a huge opportunity for them to showcase their company and what they do. I mean, they're on international television, and so a lot of them are very excited to be there, to come to be able to showcase their company and what they're doing, and they don't want to come and look like a bunch of idiots. And so, these people come on, they're well prepared, and it's funny because every time, for example, the GPR people, I remember Zach and Phil, they come out to do GPR, and they pull their equipment out, and we go to turn it on, and the battery's dead. And Phil was so flustered by that. He's like, I charged these overnight. They were full when we left the hotel in Vernal this morning. The Vernal's 20 minutes away from the ranch. And you could just see they're so perplexed. And I'm trying to think if we ever had a contractor that came on that didn't have battery failures at some point during their time there. The cell phone batteries, like that is a common occurrence all the time.
Who was the one guy on the show where not only was his phone going nuts, it was unlocking his iPhone and opening up like every single app on the phone at the exact same time. And it was literally just like his phone had gone insane. And I think Travis had first noticed it. And I can't recall the gentleman's name, but
Caleb,
yeah. Like more than just dying battery. It was like typing weird things. It was pulling up searches on his Safari. It was scrolling through all of his apps. Literally, it was going nuts.
Yeah, and Caleb got a lot of crap about that because he had a cracked screen on that phone. But the whole point of that is that, yes, you're right. There are some times when that phone turned itself on, bypassed his keypad security, and went in and started going through the apps. He's had that phone making phone calls, dialing 911, doing all kinds of crazy things. And I tell people, you know what, if that's all I got to do to bypass somebody's security on their phone is crack the screen, then that's a pretty lousy software.
Right.
I'm positive that the Apple phone is not built for that. So, and there's a one time, I believe it was when the cow died. There's a time when both my phone and his phone were doing the same thing at the same time. And we had both phones up and they were both going crazy. So, and I'm an Android guy. So I think at the time I had an HTC phone and he had his iPhone and they're both going crazy.
Android is the way to go. I'm just going to say it. I'm not an
I'm a fan. Definitely a fan.
I've tried with Apple. I'm sorry. I'm an Android guy.
As far as like the animal mutilations, it seems like it's quieted down a bit on the ranch. But how often do you guys get those cases? I mean, I know was it season 2 that there was
I believe so. Yeah. There was a UAP or some type of weird orb caught, and next thing you know, the animals are frightened as hell. They all take off, and then subsequently, when they checked it out, they find this dead cow.
Yeah, I don't know what cows did to UAPs to piss them off that much that they have to take out their frustration on cows. Don't know what.
Just leave the cows alone, man.
Just leave the cows alone. They have rights. No,
what are your thoughts on that, Thomas? What do you think about the whole cattle mutilation thing? Is that related, unrelated? I mean, it happens in many places, so it's not just isolated to the ranch. But do you have any thoughts on that phenomenon?
It's interesting. That particular cow that died on season 1, we did a necropsy on it. The vet said it died from rapid onset acute pneumonia, I believe. Which there's something that stressed the animal that caused that rapid pneumonia to come on. The interesting thing is that nothing touched that cow for a year. Now, I will tell you that all the time we're seeing coyotes down there. I want to say it was the first summer that I was there working. I was there on my skid steer, scared out a mountain lion. The mountain lion jumped out on the trail right in front of me and took off. 3 years ago, when we were gathering the cows up to get them off the ranch, there was bear tracks and bear scat down there in the trees. So we got a lot of predators out there. Not to mention, we got a lot of tribal dogs that are running around out there. A lot of predators, and so when there's animals that have died on the ranch, and or in surrounding properties around us, and they're picked over. I saw one animal after the cow died. I saw one animal that got picked over. It was gone in under 2 days. Okay, so here's this cow that dies. Not a single predator, no birds, no coyotes, nothing touched this thing. It was still intact and perfect a year later. So we bring Dr. Taylor out from, he's with the state of Utah, and we actually sawed off a leg and they sent it into the lab. They're actually they told us they didn't think it died from pneumonia, which is interesting. So, I don't know what to think, although I will tell you that since that aired, I've had a number of ranchers come forward and share with me both pictures and experiences. Matter of fact, just a month ago, I had a very well-respected, grounded individual who has a ranch. It's north of Skinwalker Ranch, but he was telling me about 2 calves of his that were mutilated, and the sex organs were gone, the eye facing the sky, all the telltale things you hear from mutilations. And he didn't want me to tell anybody his name or share that, but you get people's confidence, and then they start sharing things with you. And I think it happens a lot more than we realize.
It's a worldwide phenomenon for sure, because it happens in
Yeah.
every country, and even here in Canada, we found bison in the same state as some of the horses and cows found in other places. But seems like Skinwalker Ranch and that whole area tends to have a lot more mutilation cases than up here. But we have them occasionally. There was even one that took place in Alberta back in 2004 or something like that, and the couple that were interviewed said flat out, we think it's aliens. Like, if you saw the way that this thing was on the ground, there's no way a human could have done this. There's no way an animal could have done this. It has to be. So again, we have to link mutilations, abductions, and all that with UAPs, but that comes over with time, I think. Once people can accept one, they're going to be able to accept the other stuff as well, right?
It's
No,
not just cows too, though. I remember when we were speaking with George Knapp, and he was talking about the rancher family that used to own it, and they heard their dogs take off after some strange phenomenon, and they heard crazy yelp sounds, and they went out, and these dogs were like vaporized into the dirt, right? There was just literally an outline of where these dogs once were. So, and it wasn't a case of removing parts or anything, but some force or some type of energy literally squished these dogs into nothingness on the ranch. So, try figuring out what could possibly do something like that. And, if something's going after a cow, there's a predatory response, you would think, but domestic dogs, unless it's something massive, but then there would be predation, like you said, right? So,
Well, and I actually had an individual. I've had too many individuals, and it's a good thing for them, because most of these people always start off by telling me, "You tell anybody I said this, I'll call you a liar." Like, they don't want people to know that these things have happened to them. And I hope that stigma, with everything that's going on with congressional hearings and the world we're living in right now, I hope that stigma is following to where people feel more comfortable to share these things. But I had some individuals, and I want to say, I can't remember if it was Caleb that was showing me the pictures. It may have been Caleb, or maybe it's, I forget. But deer and elk that have been mutilated, that hunters or people, hikers, are finding up in the forest, that are mutilated in a way that, again, defies what you would find with predators. An elk that's cut cleanly in half, and the halves are separated. So, and if it's happening to deer and elk, I mean, there's a chance that you'd never even have a clue how many of those are happening, because predators will clean those up.
right. I think we've been so long not linking or putting the links together. We used to think that the mutilation cases were something that was apart But now we're starting to understand, actually, no, whenever there's UAP activity, tends to be mutilation cases that follow shortly afterwards, right? Uh, Even the black helicopters that I've heard quite a bit about it. I've had a few guests on there talking about how they have black helicopters almost scouting the farm before the mutilation actually happens. So just weird things like that you hear occasionally. You're kind of like, yeah, it is a weird phenomenon, but it is linked with the UAP. Unfortunately, the two are linked at this point. I still think we were talking about, I don't know if you know much about the Dilatov's Pass. Is that how you pronounce it?
Dyatlov Pass.
Diatlov's Pass.
You'll get it right one of these times.
I'm going to get it right eventually. I butcher names, but we tend to think that's the same thing as a cattle mutilation, except this time it was humans that got caught in the crossfire, because the way those people were found is very similar to some of the stuff that happens to these cows. So, yeah, this is definitely an interesting case for sure. As far as you were mentioning that you had dynamics on the show that are kind of hard because you're trying to do science and experiments while trying to film a show, and I've been on just a documentary recently, and I thought, the whole process of it is hard enough with the camera setting, and you got to be at a certain angle, and they got to capture things. When you're trying to do a scientific experiment like that, though, and you got to work with the production, like you mentioned, it's a nightmare. What was your worst, like, what was the biggest hurdle for you doing this?
Well, I want to be careful about saying nightmare because I have to say we work with the group of professionals that are just top shelf. I mean,
Right.
I can't speak enough to the quality of individuals that Prometheus has put out there with us, and just a high level of professionalism. So I appreciate them, and it's a nightmare in the fact that science and TV just don't mesh well when you're
Right.
trying to, you know what I mean? Like, and I'll give you a perfect example. Uh, One of the things that we observe all the time is these RF signals. Well, the problem is each one of us is wearing a microphone pack that is transmitting our audio to the audio bag. Each camera is also transmitting both audio and video back to their little monitors. We're broadcasting a lot of RF ourselves. So when you're trying to isolate these RF signals and you're creating so much noise with just your equipment, it makes it really hard to ascertain what is us and what is the ranch.
Right.
And so there are times where we'll start seeing something and we're like, okay, you guys got to take everything down. There have been a couple times where like, you have to shut everything off. We're turning our microphones off, turn the cameras off. Everything's got to go down. And the compromise there is if we find something, then we get to figure out what we need to figure out with it. Because and then we'll bring the cameras back up and we'll go through what just happened and do it again. But there's sometimes where we have to have equipment go down because we're creating so much noise that it's almost impossible to get through that. And so those are the kind of things like that you don't see. And Prometheus, and I don't know how it is on other production companies. I've never been on other film shoots, but they have this fourth wall that they call it, and that is the invisible wall between us and production. Like they don't exist.
Okay.
And sometimes it's frustrating because I mean, I think one of the biggest criticisms I see repeatedly on social media is, well, that drone's not connecting, and yet the television network drone was working just fine. And my answer to that is, I mean, it's pretty simple. First of all, that is one of the things that makes the ranch special, is that we witness so many times when things are targeted. We can have a group of people standing in a tight circle. One person in the middle can be affected while the rest of everybody else is fine. We can have 6 cell phones sitting there on the table, and one cell phone specifically will react. So there are times when it's very targeted, but there's other times where the production has a hell of a time with their own equipment. I've lost track of the number of drones that production has crashed out there.
Oh, really?
Not by lack of, I mean, our drone operator is this guy. that guy could, all he needs is a 1/2 inch clearance on both sides, and that guy can get it through. I mean, he's just a pro. But we had one drone that's sitting there flying. We were down on the south end of the ranch. We're all standing there, and it's like all of a sudden this thing just tipped and went right at, I forget which one of the production guys, and almost hit him, and then plowed in the dirt and was destroyed. And so production does have a lot of problems with their cameras, their batteries. Their batteries are going dead all the time, just like ours. So we're all struggling, and sometimes it's frustrating for us as a team, because we're like, this is all part of the science. Whether you guys like it or not, you're part of it. The second you enter on the ranch and stuff starts happening to you, you're part of the science, your data point. And yet we can't, up to this point, we really haven't acknowledged that that's taking place.
As far as I was going to say, as far as the
Not to say-
hitchhiker effect, I know that you've had a bit of that. I know George Knapp's had it, and Colm Kelleher mentioned it as well. But does the production crew at all experience any of those effects as well? Like, have you heard any stories from the production crew about the hitchhiker effect?
That's a great question.
I do have something I could add to that, because when we chatted with Colm Kelleher, who's the co-author of that book, Skinwalkers at the Pentagon, with George Knapp, he had said that there was a biotechnologist. Again, this is pre-Brendan Fugal days, but they had a biotech guy who was out there, and he wound up taking home an event where he was driving with his daughters in the car, and they had like orbs penetrating the car, these blue lights, and people had like physical illnesses as a result. So there have been other scientists, and back in the day when Bigelow owned it, they had different intelligence agencies that had people that were there, and I think there was 5 of them, and all 5 reported that they took home strange phenomenon. George Knapp said, and it was almost like an intimate detail. He said, "Look, my wife had some weird stuff happen. I don't want to get into the nitty gritty." Like, even he didn't want to talk about the specifics, but big name guys that have written books about it or spent a lot of time there, pretty well everybody has reported that something has come home with them, right? So I'm sure there's got to be, somebody
we have a
who's had that.
we have a couple team members that haven't, to this point, knock on wood, had it follow them home. I don't know why. I was just thinking, the reason why I say I'm not the best person to ask is, look, I'm good friends with the production guys. You work around each other that much, you get to be friends, but I'm not a big texting guy. So I'm not reaching out and asking, and there's just not a lot of interaction outside of filming between me and them. So maybe some of the other guys that are better at getting, I will say that, and there's not a lot I can say here, because I have to honor my NDA with production company, and I haven't gotten permission to speak about this, but I do know that, like, there have been crew members that I believe have had some experiences with things. I'm just going to leave it at that. But
does that include people on the show with you, like people that we see on television, or are we just talking about production?
Well, no, I mean, look, we call Dragon, he's our UFO repellent, our paranormal repellent, because he seems to like not have anything happen to him, right? Knock on wood. I'm not wishing it upon him. But I know the rest of the team members, to my knowledge, all the rest of us have had scary experiences, serious things. I'll tell you, the last 2 weeks have been extremely scary for me and my family. We had a night a week and a half ago where we were literally just all sitting there in my bedroom, and it was not. We were woken just right before 1 a.m. and some pretty terrifying things taking place, and it just continued. Started that night, and it continued through, and things that are hard to get your mind wrapped around. My poor kids, we just start getting that stuff in the back rearview mirror, and then something else happens, and it's pretty traumatic. So, and look, we're trying to document this stuff. Matter of fact, we just launched our new website, skinwalker-ranch.com, and we've got the Skinwalker Ranch Insider, where you can sign up, and we're trying to document this stuff. That's going to be our outlet for these things that are happening when we're not filming. The investigation, once the cameras go down, we're done filming, the investigation continues. The ranch doesn't take a break, and neither do we. And so some of these things that are happening, we've got, the last month's been very, very active. I don't know why, but a lot of things, and the hitchhiker being one of those. And I know, speaking to some of the team members, I'm not the only one that has been experiencing that stuff. So
Right.
So what's going on with season 3 this year? Can you give us a teaser or anything that's already been aired that you're safe to talk about? What can we look forward to?
Anything that's been on TV is fair game. So if you guys have questions about things you've already seen, I'm happy to answer about that. I think I'll give you a teaser for this week. This year is different. So the last couple of years I've cheated, and I've watched the episodes before they aired. I was able to see them, and so I knew it was coming up. This year, the only thing I've seen is the previews, like everybody else. Yeah, so I haven't seen any of the episodes. I'm watching them for the first time with everybody else at home, and based on the previews that I'm watching for this week, I've gotten a few questions on podcasts last little bit, like, what's the most disturbing thing that's happened to you on Skinwalker Ranch? And I've had to tell the last couple, well, I can't talk about it. It hasn't aired on TV yet. So the most disturbing thing that I witnessed on the ranch this year, I believe, is going to be on this next episode. Kept me awake for many nights. I mean, it was eerie when it happened, but the implications of what it could mean are absolutely frightening and terrifying. And so that's coming up this week, I believe. It was probably one of the craziest experiments that we've done. And so I'm really excited for that to air. The bottle drop, I mean, that right out of the gate, that was really strange. I mean, we worked really hard. Eric specifically, he put so many, I mean, tens and tens and tens of hours into testing each one of those GPS units. Him and I took those units and actually literally walked down to give you an idea, he kept the little base receiver that they were reporting to. So these GPS units, they have a scan disc, or you can put a memory card into them. They data log onto the card, but they also have a transmitter receiver, so they can be transmitting real time. And we left the receiver at the command center, and we went and walked along the length of the mesa out on the edge of it, so that we could overlay it on the map and see just how accurate the information was getting. We went and did that with all the receivers. Eric had all the receivers laid out in a box. We walked along the mesa, perfect data. And we tested them multiple times. So then comes the day with the experiment, and we drop these bottles out. And first of all, they take off and the receivers stop transmitting. So we're getting no real time. And our only hopes of salvaging this is to be able to retrieve the GPS sensors and get the memory disk out, and then we at least still have the data logged. And we only found half of them. And the crazy thing is they dropped all of these out from the same location, and yet we were finding bottles as far as a quarter to half a mile north, and I want to say 3/4 to a mile to the south. So that is the distance apart that we were finding these bottles. We found them clear 100, 200 yards south of the creek down there on the eastern part of the ranch. So how those ended up that way with just a slight little breeze, I don't know.
Yeah.
We only were able, but then you guys saw the data, GPS diving into the hill as if the helicopter crashed in. You know, we like I say, we only recovered half of it. So
What's your favorite experimentation that you guys have done so far? Like, what's your favorite one?
favorite is in data gleaned, or favorite is in fun to do?
Just the fun one to do. Just there's got to be
Oh,
one in there that
rocket.
at least is. Oh, really? Eh? Yeah. I
Yeah, I
figured.
mean,
Yeah.
especially season 2, those rockets that we blasted off. I mean,
Yeah.
some of those were like 12 foot tall.
That was
And
like
so
an
you're
amateur rocket club or something, wasn't it? Like an advanced level. Was it a company that had those things, or were they just like crazy hobbyists?
no, these guys are professionals.
Oh, okay.
I'm gonna get their name wrong, and I apologize to them right now. It's either Lock Precision or Precision Lock.
Okay.
But that's what they do, and they build these for people, and they've been absolutely great. They came out in yeah, season 2. They came out and helped us blast off those big ones, and I mean, uh, that's a lot of fun. It's probably as close as I'll get to watching the space shuttle launch as ever, but I mean, it's impressive. It's a lot of fun.
You guys were trying to get the data, as you mentioned earlier, that triangulation where so many feet off the ground, that's where weird phenomenon seems to happen. That's where you pick up the gamma rays and stuff like that. So was the intent to measure at a higher altitude, or was the intent to try to cause something spooky to happen by shooting stuff up through that vortex zone?
Well, yeah, I mean, there is that line of thought that by shooting the rocket off, we're going to stimulate something,
Yeah.
right? The bigger rockets, though, was one, we could get a bigger payload on it, so we can add more instrumentation. The other thing that we were looking at is getting higher and trying to get more dwell time up high, and see it coming down. Like that last rocket that we blasted off, I think went up 13,000 feet. And so
Well,
the whole idea of getting more hang time up in the air, uh, that was one thing that we were trying to accomplish with the bigger rockets. Yeah,
question.
this elusive
Yeah.
space.
Question on the side, because I've always wondered when people show up, because people are all different, but you have a lot of people that show up on the ranch. Some of them might be more spiritual than others. Have you found that the spiritual people have more of an effect on the ranch, or walk away with more of an effect, or is it even the skeptics that walk away with a profound change in the way that they are once they leave the ranch?
Um, it's a great question. So up until there's an asterisk next to this, and this would be, I believe, last episode when we had UAPX out and Jason, we had to put Jason in the silo.
I didn't see that episode. I'm sorry, I missed that one.
Oh,
Yeah.
cow. Now, yeah, so like I don't know what his attitude was coming on the ranch, so I
Right.
can't speak to him. But in this whole process, one thing we're trying to identify is patterns. What, does it happen when it's cold? Was it hot? Is it when it's a full moon, no moon? Is it a calendar day? Like, what is it, right?
Right.
And we've had a hard time identifying any patterns. There's a couple small minor ones, and one of them is we look at the individuals who have been injured on the ranch, and like again, without speaking Jason, I not sure what his mindset was when he came on the ranch, but the rest of us, it almost seems like the more belligerent's probably not the right word, skeptical, um, that you come on the ranch, the more negative effect it has on you.
Okay.
It's
People that
almost like
underestimate it get surprised the most.
we get humbled.
Yeah.
Yep. And the people that come on with a level of respect and a level of reverence, they seem to be okay. And I don't know how like hard that is as far as a pattern, but we look at the individuals that have been hurt, and as we start looking at the ones that have suffered the most severe injuries, we were the ones that came on and were like, oh, that's stupid. There's nothing here that's going to hurt me. I'll throw myself in that right there. I mean, I had that attitude of,
Right.
this is stupid. Don't bother me with it. And I got humbled really quick. And I've watched other individuals with that same attitude. I had an individual, I don't know, a year ago, 9 months ago, had that attitude and had a severe medical episode.
Oh wow.
And I thought the dude was having like cardiac arrest. Started his face flushed up completely red. He started pouring sweat like this. This is in a matter of seconds. Starts sweating, grasping his chest, having a hard time breathing. I thought the dude was having a full-on heart attack. Got him off the ranch, and I was rushing him straight to the hospital. By the time we got to the Fort Duchesne grocery store, he was sitting back up. He's like, "I'm not going to the hospital. I don't want to go to the hospital," and wouldn't let me take him. And you know, but again, his whole attitude was, "There's nothing here. This is all BS."
Right.
And so
You approach it with that
yeah, and
attitude of, yeah, you got to prove something to me, and it was proven.
yeah, and it's tough because there's things that have to take place on this ranch.
Yeah.
For example, when we did the wastewater permit, well, I have to get a contractor. The health department requires me to get a contractor that's licensed to put that in. So it's hard to tell the contractor, well, you can't bring that employee or that employee on. You have to, you have to let these people do their work. So same with we've got the right of way for the canal going through there. I have zero say in who the canal company brings on that ranch to go clean out the ditches or maintain the canal. I don't get a say in that. So you see some of these, the best we can do is accompany them, right?
Right.
And so we get some of these individuals on there for which we really have no legal control over that.
Yeah.
And you start seeing these things happen. And I just don't know how to stress more to people, like, you got to come on with a level of respect and reverence. I know it sounds corny, but from what we've seen, that's one of the few things we can say, that if you come on with a level of respect and reverence, the odds say you're going to be much more likely to come off in
Right.
good shape.
Approach it with respect, and nothing will happen to you, type thing. Do you guys have a lot of issues with fans trying to find the ranch and trying to come onto the ranch? Because I figured at this point that's got to be an issue.
It was it was an issue before the show. It was an issue before we went worldwide, and then we went worldwide and it became a massive issue.
Right.
Draggy, Caleb, and the security team have their work cut out for them. I will say though, I'm going to put a plug in for these guys, LiveView Technologies, that brought out these sophisticated camera systems that you saw on episode 1 this year. Jeez. That has cut down on our problems by like 95%. I can't even begin to tell you just what those units have done. So huge shout out to LiveView Technologies for their equipment. It's been a game changer. They're highly sophisticated, and it's also given us a lot more control over you can't physically cover 512 acres easily. And so we've had to rely on both manpower and on technology, and LiveView bringing us out those units has been night and day difference.
Yeah. Not to mention the liability issues of people on your land, right? Like if anything happens to them, you could get sued. Like, I don't know if it's the same as it is in the States as it is in Canada, but you could get sued for practically anything. So somebody's on your land to get injured, that's a liability, right?
True story. Yep.
Perfect. Before we close, Louis, do you have any final questions for our guest?
No, I just want to say that it was really awesome having you on the show. I'm a huge personal fan of not only the phenomenon, the ranch, but the show itself. I think you guys do a really good job. It doesn't, as you mentioned, you don't cast the show, so there's no actors. And even though some of that footage is captured after the phenomenon, it still has a genuine feel to it. It feels like you guys treat it with a level of sincerity. You're not trying to make a joke of it or a horror movie out of it. You have that scientific mind, and the ranch is weird enough that it's giving you what you're looking for. So season 1 and 2 is great. Beginning of season 3 is awesome. And we look forward to seeing the rest of it. So just want to say on behalf of Jason and myself, thanks very much, Thomas, for coming on our show again.
Hey, it's been great to visit with you guys, and enjoy my time with you.
Are you paying attention?